During the golden age of freak shows, there were people so strange and so unsettling that even the circus couldn't handle them. Some were banned for violating laws, others for terrifying the public, and a few just pushed the wrong limits at the wrong time. As freak shows faded in the mid-20th century, thanks to changing morals, exposés by journalists like Henry, and the rise of the internet, the most extreme acts were erased. But their stories didn't vanish. From banned twins to real-life wolfmen, these are the circus freaks the world tried to forget, but couldn't. Number 15. Minnesota Iceman. The Minnesota Iceman was promoted as a frozen missing link, half man, half ape, on display in shopping malls and state fairs across the US and Canada from the late 1960s into the early 70s. He was hairy, about 6 feet long, and appeared to have been killed by a gunshot to the face. Frank Hansen, the exhibitor, claimed he was storing the body for an unknown millionaire who found it in Siberia. Smithsonian researchers were called in and quickly declared it a fake, likely made of rubber and latex. Soon after, Hansen swapped out the original with an obvious replica and denied that anything had ever changed. The hoax faded until 2013, when the entire display was auctioned off on eBay and bought by the Museum of the Weird in Austin, Texas. It's still there. Despite being fake, the Iceman worked because he looked real enough. It wasn't banned everywhere, but certain cities blocked it under public decency laws. But it still pulled crowds. Number 14. The Kostroma people of Russia. In 1874, posters began appearing in European cities advertising the hirsute people of Kostroma. These were people from central Russia's forest regions, promoted as a distinct tribe with faces completely covered in thick hair. Most historians believe they suffered from congenital hypertrichosis lanuginosa, a rare condition sometimes called werewolf syndrome. They were grouped and marketed as the Kostroma forest people, often displayed in family units, wearing traditional Russian clothing to appear more authentic. This wasn't one person. It was a rotating group of individuals with similar conditions, branded as a tribe. Their appearance was exploited for profit, but in several cities they were banned from performing after religious groups protested that they were being treated like animals. Despite the ban, similar hairy family acts appeared under different names throughout Europe in the late 19th century. There's no official record of what happened to most of them. The hype faded, and so did the names. But the posters remain, preserved as examples of how far showmen would go to sell spectacle. Number 13. The Giant of Constantine. Julius Koch was advertised as the Giant of Constantine, one of the tallest men ever put on display. He was born in 1872 in Germany, and his exact height is debated, but estimated at just over 8 feet. His size came from gigantism caused by a tumor on the pituitary gland, which also damaged his legs. By the time Koch was in his late 20s, he'd developed gangrene in both legs and underwent a double amputation. That didn't end the touring. Even with prosthetics and reduced mobility, Koch continued making public appearances. In 1902, he starred in a short silent film titled The Giant Constantine, meant to show off his scale more than anything else. He died later that same year at 30. After death, his skeleton was preserved and is still on display at the Museum of Natural History in Mons. Koch wasn't banned because of behavior. He was banned in some places simply because authorities found his body size too unsettling for public display. Number 12. Cardiff Giant. In 1869, workers in Cardiff, New York, discovered a 10-foot-tall petrified man buried on a farm. Within days, it was headline news. Church leaders claimed it was proof of biblical giants. Thousands paid to see it. But it was a hoax. George Hull, an atheist and cigar manufacturer, created the statue to mock literal interpretations of Scripture. He had it carved from gypsum, stained it with acid and ink, and buried it on his cousin's land. A year later, it was found during a staged well dig. When P.T. Barnum couldn't buy the statue, he made a replica and claimed his was real. Eventually, Hull confessed, admitting the goal was to expose how easily people believe what confirms their beliefs. Both the original and Barnum's fake are still around, one in Cooperstown, New York, the other in Michigan. The Cardiff Giant wasn't banned because of what it was. It was banned in some cities because of what it said about the people looking at it. Number 11. The Great American Prize Lady. In 1868, Miss C. Heenan was promoted across American and European sideshows as the Great American Prize Lady. Her estimated weight was around 560 pounds, placing her among the heaviest touring women of the 19th century. Unlike other fat lady performers who leaned into comedy or costume gimmicks, Heenan was typically dressed in formal wear and presented more like a royal figure than a novelty. Her shows weren't comedic. They were closer to staged portraits, where visitors simply paid to stand in her presence. At the time, obesity was still rare enough to draw crowds, especially among women. Heenan's act was relatively short-lived. She appeared mostly in posters and local circuit advertisements, then disappeared from records entirely by the 1870s. In certain cities, she was denied performance licenses due to complaints that the exhibition was in poor taste. That didn't stop the posters, which circulated long after her career ended. Today, she remains one of the more mysterious figures from the circus era. Number 10. The Nondescript. Julia was born in Mexico and had one of the most documented cases of hypertrichosis. Her face and body were completely covered in thick, dark hair. Her jaw and gums were enlarged due to gingival hyperplasia, which gave her a highly unusual appearance. Promoters called her the Nondescript, not out of mystery, but because they couldn't easily label what they were selling. She toured across Europe and the U.S. in the 1840s and 50s, dancing, singing, and speaking multiple languages. In 1854, she married her manager, Theodore Lent, who later exploited her even after her death. When she died during childbirth, Lent had her body, and that of her baby, mummified and continued exhibiting them for years. Governments eventually stepped in and banned further display. Her remains were passed between collections until 2013, when she was finally returned to Mexico and buried. Pastrana was never banned for performance. She was banned posthumously, once it became clear no one intended to let her rest. Number 9. Alzoria Lewis and Johanna Dickens. Alzoria Lewis and Johanna worked in Coney Island sideshows between the 1930s and 1950s. Though often billed as sisters, they weren't related. Alzoria was born in Brooklyn in 1912 and had a combination of skeletal deformities, including shortened limbs, 6 fingers per hand, and fused toes. She performed under names like Turtle Girl and Pig Woman, usually crawling on stage while the announcer told a fictional backstory involving the American South. In reality, she lived only a few miles from the venue. She married twice and sometimes performed under her legal name, Alzoria Green. Johanna Dickens, likely born in the 1920s, was a dwarf performer promoted as Bear Girl. Her act leaned on similar tropes: animal names, false tribal origins, and exaggerated details. Neither woman chose their labels, but both worked full-time in an industry that left little space for correction. Some venues banned their act for inappropriate content, while others headlined it as exoticism. After the 1950s, both disappeared from the public record. Number 8. May Jo. George Francis Ethinger toured under the stage name May Jo during the early 20th century. He was born with both intersex anatomy and a parasitic twin, an undeveloped mass attached to his lower body that included limb-like extensions. He was displayed by his parents in fairs from a young age, later joining the traveling shows of Buffalo Bill and Pawnee Bill. His act was advertised using terms like the three-legged he-she or half-man, half-woman, with posters focusing on the extra leg and ambiguous body features. Over the years, George used several aliases including Josephine Lynn, Joe Pearl, and Elsie Pearl, depending on the promoter and region. He was not known to speak during performances. Instead, the exhibit consisted of silent appearances. Certain cities banned the act on the grounds of medical indecency. By the late 1940s, his name no longer appeared in public listings. No obituary or verified photograph from his later life exists. What remains is scattered promotional material and inconsistent census listings. Number 7. John Daniel the Gorilla. John Daniel was a western lowland gorilla raised as a human child in the village of Ely, England. Born in 1917 in Gabon, he was orphaned after soldiers killed his mother. An English officer, Major Rupert Penny, brought him to Europe, where Penny's aunt, Alice Cunningham, took over his care. She raised John as if he were a boy. He rode in cars, drank cider, ate at the table, and attended village tea parties. At over 200 pounds, he was gentle, social, and fully integrated into daily life. As he grew, however, his size made him harder to manage. In 1921, Cunningham was misled into selling him to a supposed retirement sanctuary in Florida. Instead, he was sent to Barnum and Bailey and later placed in the Ringling Zoo in New York. Removed from his domestic life, he became withdrawn and died of pneumonia in 1922. His body was preserved and displayed. A statue now stands in Ule to commemorate the gorilla they called a friend. Number 6. The Elephant Girl. Sylvia Portoris was known on the circuit as the Elephant Girl, performing with sideshows during the 1940s. She had advanced elephantiasis, a condition that caused her right leg to swell to an abnormal size, making walking difficult. Her act didn't involve tricks or movement. She appeared on stage in simple clothing, standing or seated while the crowd observed. Sylvia didn't speak much publicly, but she was known to repeat a quiet line when asked about her condition. "It's God's will." She worked for several seasons across the South and Midwest, often with traveling medicine shows or low-budget carnivals. In some cities, local ordinances prevented her from appearing, citing public discomfort or decency concerns. While most performers adopted characters or stage names, Sylvia performed under her own. Off-stage, she was quiet and direct, choosing to remain in the background when not working. Her career faded by the late 1940s, and we don't know why, but there are no more records that follow her beyond that. Number 5. Elmer McCurdy. Elmer McCurdy died in 1911 after a failed train robbery and a brief shootout. No family or friend claimed the body. The undertaker embalmed him with arsenic, dressed him up, and stood him in the funeral home as an exhibit. Visitors paid a nickel to see him. Carnies posing as relatives later took the corpse and began touring with it. For decades, McCurdy's remains traveled across the U.S., from medicine shows to wax museums to grindhouse film sets. At one point, he was mislabeled as a prop of a dead junkie and nailed to a theater wall. In 1976, while filming The $6 Million Man, a crew member accidentally broke off the arm, revealing real bone. That's when authorities realized it was human. Forensic testing confirmed it was McCurdy. He was finally buried in 1977 in Oklahoma, with concrete poured over the coffin to prevent future tampering. Well, for over 60 years, his mummified corpse was mistaken for a mannequin. Number 4. Ada Briggs. Ada Briggs became a known figure on the American museum circuit in the 1870s. She stood under 5 feet tall and weighed over 520 pounds, performing under titles like The Fat Beauty and The Great Fat Lady. She was born in Pulaski County, Kentucky, and entered show business in her early 20s. Her act did not involve movement or humor. She sat posed in decorated chairs, often dressed in embroidered gowns. By 1878, she was headlining events like the Fat Women's Convention in Baltimore, where she was billed at 536 pounds. Newspapers occasionally profiled her, noting her calm demeanor and insistence on fair compensation. While most performers of her size earned $40 weekly, Briggs was known to demand $60 and received it. Some towns refused her exhibitions under public decency laws, but she continued working. She appeared in promotional posters across several states. There is no verified information about her death, and no remaining personal records beyond her touring years have been found. Number 3. Lucia Zora. Lucia's path to the circus didn't begin in a tent. Her family sent her to seminary school to train as a classical singer. She took auditions, followed opportunities, and eventually joined a traveling show, not for performance, but for survival. After one circus folded, she flipped pancakes in a storefront to pay rent. In 1904, she joined the Sells Floto Circus and asked to be trained as an animal handler, a position not open to women at the time. Fred Allisbaugh, a seasoned elephant trainer, taught her the ropes. Within 2 years, Lucia was commanding full acts involving lions, elephants, and Bengal tigers. Her tools, a whip, a chair, and a blank pistol. She relied on timing and calm control, not punishment. Crowds called her the bravest woman in the world. She toured until 1917, when she retired from public life. Lucia died in 1936, one of the first women in the United States to headline a wild animal act without a male partner or scripted stage persona. Number 2. Stella the Bearded Lady. Betty McGregor, better known as Stella the Bearded Lady, was born in Battle Creek, Michigan in 1902. She began growing facial hair during adolescence and tried to manage it with daily shaving. By her late 20s, she stopped and entered the sideshow circuit. She worked with Ringling Bros and later with Ward Hall's traveling shows during World War II. Her presentation was simple. She sat or stood on stage in modest clothing, her beard left fully visible. Stella previously worked as a nurse and had some experience in education before joining the circus. She didn't perform an act beyond being present, and she declined to participate in fabricated backstories. In some towns, she was barred from appearing on moral grounds. She continued touring until the 1970s, when most sideshow venues closed. After retiring, she worked clerical jobs under her legal name. She passed away in 1977. There were no press mentions at the time, and her name remains largely unrecognized outside vintage circus archives. Number 1. The Human Blockhead. The Human Blockhead act looks like a horror trick, but it's pure anatomy. Performers push nails, drills, even screwdrivers straight into their nostrils, while stunned audiences brace for blood. But the secret is all in the nasal cavity. Instead of going up toward the brain, the object slides horizontally through the sinus passage toward the throat. Melvin Burkhart, a sideshow legend, turned a boxing injury into the foundation for this now iconic act. From nails to balloons to butter knives, anything long and narrow became fair game. Doc Swami once sneezed out a nail after getting it stuck mid-act. In 2005, National Geographic verified the stunt using a camera probe, confirming it wasn't a trick. It was guts, grit, and training. James Randi later exposed a Brazilian faith healer for using this exact routine to scam believers. And Ryan Stock? He went further, hanging 70 pounds from a meat hook threaded through his sinus cavity. This wasn't an illusion. It was calculated self-harm, repurposed into art, and sold as a ticket. If you found this video interesting, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.